Hello and welcome to the 1000 Authors Show. I'm Vicky Fraser and this is my husband Joe.
Hello.
Hello. And today we are drinking tea because it's been foggy all day.
Foggy, it's cold, it's mid-afternoon.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So I am drinking, because Joe got me a beautiful tea event calendar for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And it has tea in every one of the drawers, four sachets of tea. I am drinking, today's tea is Chelsea Garden, which is white tea with rose petals, and it's delicious. And you are drinking Piccadilly
Blend tea.
which is kind of fruity and delicious. So it's all from Whittards. Hi Whittards.
Hi Whittards, if you'd like to sponsor us, just send us much tea.
Yes, that would be awesome actually. And if anyone would like to sponsor us for gin, then you can send us gin too. So yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. It's been a bit of a tough couple of days here at Casa Dingle, because Kernick the tiny sheep has been really quite poorly.
He's an idiot. Let's face it. He's not very bright.
There was a raid on the chicken run, which normally the sheeps can't get into, but they managed it, and so you came in and found food gone. Yeah,
he learnt a new trick and managed to get his way past the chicken run door, knocked over all the food for the chickens, ate it all, which initially we just thought, oh, well, that's a bit of chicken food got ate, never mind, eh? And then the next day he was really ill.
Yeah, I just found him standing in the field and the staggering was what really frightened me. But the vet came out and she gave him antibiotics and painkillers and gave us some stuff to give him antacid drenches. And the problem is, chicken food isn't poisonous to sheep, but it is not good for them. It's wrong for them, and it's too rich, and it's got too much of the wrong stuff, and it makes them bloat. So, because sheep have rumens, which is like a section of their stomach where they break down some of the food, and it's where the grass and stuff goes, and then they'll bring it back up to chew the cud. That's how that works. And if the wrong food gets into the rumen, the wrong bacteria grows, and it makes them really gassy, and it can be super dangerous. The bloat can, because it can mean that they can't breathe. Amongst all sorts of other things, and it can damage their livers and all sorts of stuff. So we were really freaked out, and the vet said if he makes it through the night, he'll probably be fine. So
he made it through the night.
Did make it through the night. We were considering bringing him into the house actually, because it's cold last night, but he took himself under the shelter, and when we went out to see him at 11, he was okay.
He was all right.
And yeah, this morning he's up and about nibbling hay. He's had some more antacid drenches.
She does not like. But yesterday he was like completely passive and allowing us to just put them into him.
And today he was like, I've had enough of that.
Yeah, fuck this, I don't want it.
So hopefully by the time we do the next podcast, we'll be like, yay, Kernick the tiny sheep is back to normal. But we're still quite worried, because sheep, they're funny. One of the things that they do best is die. And they tend to, they're odd, because they tend to they hide their symptoms anyway until it's really late, because they're prey animals. So all prey animals, and chickens are the same, will hide the fact that they're ill until they're almost dead, which is a problem because it means you can't treat them. And also sheep have this weird thing where they tend to sort of give up.
Yeah.
They get ill and then they give up, and it's odd. So fingers crossed, Kernick the tiny sheep will be fine. But it's been a tough couple of days because of that. Anyway, we are today talking about sleepwalking through life.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, we're just going to do our normal what we're reading. Joe, what are you reading?
I'm reading Iolos Revenge.
Iolos.
Yolo?
Yeah.
Yolo.
It's a Welsh name.
Okay.
Yolo.
Spelt I-O-L-O.
It's pronounced Yola.
Yolo. Yolo's Revenge by Diana Ashworth.
Which is what I was reading last week.
Which is what you were reading last week. It's lovely. It's very nice.
Are you enjoying it?
Yeah. It's quite light and pleasant and
it's just lots of little stories, isn't it, about life on the sheep farm. And
a couple of people who found themselves accidentally sheep farming.
Yeah.
In a tumble-down cottage.
They ended up with a flock of, I think they ended up with like 50 odd in the end. They started off with 10 or 11. And we've just got the 3, which is plenty. And I am reading Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Soames.
All right.
Or Seames. No, Eames, not Soames. Nicholas Soames is somebody entirely different, isn't he? Nicholas Eames. It's comedy fantasy, and it's about bands that go touring, but not music bands. It's about bands of heroes.
Right.
And they kind of go touring and they get famous, and they're like the rock stars of the fantasy world. And it's very funny. It's not like ha 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 comedy all the way through. It's just like a tongue in cheek, slightly fun poking at the fantasy genre. And it's very good. I'm really enjoying it. I'm already looking forward to book 2, and I'm only a third of the way through book 1.
Cool.
So that's really cool. The non-fiction that I'm reading at the moment, I finally finished Atomic Habits, which was a magnificent book, like life-changing book. I've been up at 6:30 every day for the last month, haven't I?
More or less.
And it's just a case of tiny changes to habits and things. So that's been really cool. But I am reading now, or I'm literally about to start reading, this book, which is The Art of Asking by Amanda fucking Palmer. And Amanda Palmer is a rock star and a writer, and she's married to Neil Gaiman, who is one of my writer heroes. And this book is all about how to, well, it's kind of a memoir, I guess, but it's all about how she learned to ask for help, really. Because she spent quite a long time performing as a living statue in a wedding dress. And she's done all sorts of interesting performance art, and she was in the Dresden Dolls, which are a really good band. And she's just a very interesting person, and I really like her. And also, if you want to see something hilarious, Google Amanda Palmer and the Daily Mail, or just Google Amanda fucking Palmer, because the Daily Mail hates women, and they wrote a piece attacking her, and she did a performance art piece in response to it, and it's hilarious and great and thoughtful, and it's just wonderful. It's everything that I love about attacking the Daily Mail, because it's an evil rag, the Daily Mail. It is. It's poison. So yeah, if you're going to read any newspapers, we used to have a thing in the press office that I used to work in, and the charity that I used to work in, and because we had to read the papers and kind of find anything that was relevant to what the charity did, and we had to institute a rule that you weren't allowed, because people would have like a newspaper each or a couple of newspapers each, you weren't allowed to read both the Daily Mail and the Daily Express on the same day, because it was a health hazard.
It's like too much.
Yeah, it's too much poison. Anyway, so that's what we're reading at the moment. And speaking of the Daily Mail and thinking, that's what this episode is all about.
Right.
It's all about how to think, and how to think critically, because, the problem is that we all fall into bad thinking habits, because thinking's hard.
It's expensive, isn't it?
It is expensive.
It takes time, takes energy. You might discover things you don't enjoy very much.
Yeah. And, well, first of all, okay, so we have 2 systems in our brain. And if you know anything about psychology and how the brain works, then this is, you'll probably know this. If not, it's super interesting. Psychologists describe it as like, psychologists? Yeah, that's the word. If I'm not a psychiatrist, that's the pathology of the brain, isn't it?
Yeah.
Psychologists describe it as, and neuroscientists as well, system 1 and system 2. And system 1 is the automatic part of your brain that takes care of driving and brushing your teeth, and
it's the lizard bit.
It's the lizard bit. It's the habits. It's where everything's done automatically, and it's there because it saves our lives.
So is that like heartbeats and breathing and all that kind of stuff? Or
sort of. That's it. No, not yes and no. So that's part of it, but I'm talking about the unconscious stuff that you learn to do. So when you get in a car and you've been driving for a while,
and you just drive. You
don't think about, I have to like put my foot on the accelerator, on the clutch, and I have to change gear, and then I have to let it off. You don't think about that. You just do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's automatic, which also can be a problem. But that's what system 1 does, and it's like you don't have to think about every action when you brush your teeth, and you don't have to think, I need to open a door, I need to grasp the door handle, and
turn it clockwise.
Yeah, and that also goes for habits like smoking and drinking and sitting and watching Netflix all evening. They are the habits that your body gets into, and system 1 takes care of that for you. Mm-hmm. So it's shortcuts and it's energy saving.
Stuff you've learned to do that you don't need to think about anymore.
Yeah, and it's really, really important. There's it's how animals are built, really. Mm-hmm. Animals are basically system 1 machines. And so are we to a large extent. But then we've also got system 2, and system 2 is our problem solving.
Right.
Stuff. So when you're learning something new, when you're learning to drive, that's system 2 that's working there, because you're having to figure out all of this stuff. When you are reading a book, if you're not just reading brainless pulp, if you're reading something that you want to learn from, that's system 2. If you're learning a language, if you're learning to play a musical instrument,
mm-hmm.
That's all system 2 as well. So all of the stuff that's hard, and it is really, really hard work as well. And the reason we've got system 1 is because your brain uses more calories than any other part of your body.
Right.
Unless you're kind of
you're actually climbing a tree at that point.
You're actually climbing a tree, yeah. But thinking is really, really hard work. So have you ever kind of spent a couple of hours working on a really tricky problem and then been like tired and hungry afterwards? That's because all of the calories, your brain has guzzled all of the calories that that were in your body,
Yeah.
basically. And the problem with that is that if something then pops out of the bushes at you with big, like, pointy teeth, you're not going to have the energy left to run away from it.
Right.
Or to, stab it, or to figure out how to get away from it. So that's why we tend to always default to system 1, because it's an energy-saving device.
Okay.
Which is cool. But the problem with that is that, and I actually think it's really interesting that we've evolved to have system 2 at all, because...
Well, yeah, I mean, we've got unreasonably large brains, haven't we?
Which is a problem for another reason as well, because childbirth is incredibly dangerous for human females. Incredibly dangerous, and that's why.
One of the reasons why we're born so early, isn't it?
Yeah, because otherwise our giant melons would, rip women to bits. But again, it's like they've I say it. There's nothing conscious driving it, but it's interesting, I think, that we have evolved to have these giant brains, because they're not efficient in terms of energy and all the rest of it, and they're not efficient in terms of being born either. And so the payoff of problem solving must have been worth it, I guess, in evolutionary terms.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess you've got a couple of different routes, haven't you? You either evolve in a sharp and pointy direction, or you evolve in a strong direction, or you evolve in a clever direction, or I don't know. There's like camouflage and other systems of survival, I suppose.
Yeah, but they don't take up. They're kind of passive, though. They don't take energy to...
Well, they do. It must take more energy to generate stripy feathers than plain ones, and it must take more energy to...
Maybe.
Be strong enough to not get eaten by things.
Yeah, maybe.
And grow claws to defend yourself with and all that kind of stuff. So I guess evolution's just casting around all avenues of advancement, and we happen to be the ones that got the brain. Yeah.
I just find it really interesting that's what helped us survive. And I guess just when it was at that tipping point between, is it better evolutionarily speaking to have a bigger brain or to have the system 1 stuff that, do you know what I mean? It's that, yeah, I wonder what it was, that one thing that...
Community stuff, I reckon it's social stuff. Social stuff developed.
Maybe.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Anyway, we could go down a massive wormhole here, so let's stop there. You've been down enough wormholes today. But you can also get into bad thinking habits. And the reason, again, is energy conservation, system 1, system 2. So, and for me, bad thinking habits are thinking things like, I know what I think, I know what I like, this is the way I am.
I've made this decision before and I'm not making it again.
Yeah, I vote this way, I vote for these people. This is particularly interesting at the moment. It's like, this is who I vote for, this is what I think about politics, about religion, about that annoying man that lives down the road.
Yeah.
That's what I think. And the other thing that is kind of bad habits, I think, is the instant opinions that we get fed to us by social media, by the news media, by the BBC, by all of those kind of things. It's like, oh, here is what you should think.
It's a lot easier and more energy efficient to just accept stuff.
Yeah.
If somebody you trust says this is, don't eat those red berries, then you just believe them, don't you?
Yeah.
It's simpler.
And, there are situations where that's a good thing to do, because if somebody
don't
says,
eat those red berries.
Don't touch that, it's really hot, but with stuff that's not immediate life and death, that's really bad. It's a bad habit to get into, and it's just, and I'm as guilty of falling into it as the next person, because
it's almost impossible not to fall into that habit.
Yeah.
Because we don't all drive to work thinking, turn this thing to go left a bit and wiggle that stick and foot clutch and all that business, do we?
No, and it's difficult. So in this episode of the podcast, I wanted to go through 8 ways that you can improve your critical thinking skills, and we'll come to that in a minute.
Okay.
Because it is something that you have to work on and practice, and it's not something that we're really taught in school, or I wasn't really taught in school how to think. Were you? Like overtly?
Not directly, but I do think a lot of what we were taught required it.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this earlier when I was planning the podcast, because I was thinking, yeah.
Good.
And I was thinking really I was using my system too, Joe. And I was thinking about it really carefully, because I'm not knocking. I do think our education system needs a massive overhaul, because I think it was created in Victorian times to produce automatons for factories, and I do think it needs a big overhaul. Throw the hate at me, teachers. I am not bashing teachers at all. It's the system that I've got a problem with. I think teachers are largely wonderful people. But yeah, I was trying to think about this. A lot of what we do at school is geared towards passing exams and not thinking. So it's like, how many facts can you remember for this history exam, or, for this English exam, or for a French exam? And I never have liked exams. I don't think they're the best way to gauge people's ability. And we're taught to kind of memorize stuff and regurgitate facts. And even when it comes to science, because I was genuinely thinking, even when it came to history and English, I was never really encouraged that much to form my own opinion.
Really?
I don't think so. I might be being unfair here.
I remember writing essays on, imagine this and empathise with that and write this from the other viewpoint and,
I never got essays on write this from the other viewpoint. That would have been cool.
What's your opinion on this? And now next week it will be directly the opposite. Well, yeah, I remember things like that. And I remember applying technique, learning techniques in maths and then being asked sort of different questions and having to kind of put the things you knew how to do together to get from one place to another.
Oh yeah, that kind of problem solving in maths and science I do remember, and I think that can teach you stuff. But I was thinking about what I learned in English, and I remember reading books, and then we would think about what was the author trying to say, but I don't ever remember a lesson in which it was like, what have you taken away from this? It was always, what do you think the author's deeper message was here? And quite often I think the author's deeper message was, I'm just going to write this shit.
I'm going to write a story.
Not always, obviously, but so yeah. I mean, I might be wrong, and I might be misremembering myself. I did not enjoy school, so I may not be, remembering accurately. But I also think that when you leave that environment, you stop thinking because you almost don't have to anymore.
Again, I think it depends what you do. What you do for a job. Yeah,
it does depend. I mean, you have to think.
I'm an engineer. I spend a lot of time scratching my head thinking about things.
Yeah, but I don't think everybody does.
No, probably not.
And I don't think people practice this stuff either. And also the other thing that people do, and this is really destructive to thinking, is multitasking, which, by the way, nobody can do. Mm-hmm. Is not possible. We can't run two pieces of software in our heads at the same time like a computer can. We can't do it.
Right.
It's called task switching. So whenever somebody says that they're really good at multitasking, I laugh at them because I'm like, you can't. You're not.
No, multiplexing, not multitasking.
Maybe. Yeah, two screens. Is that what multiplex is? I'm thinking of cinemas. I don't know.
Not that kind of multiplex, but close enough.
Okay. So yeah, what people are doing, slight aside, what you're doing when you think you're multitasking is task switching really quickly, and you're not doing either of those things very well. Mm-hmm. Because it takes quite a lot of energy to task switch, and it takes a lot of concentration. And they reckon it takes 20 minutes to get back into a task again after you've been interrupted. So bear that in mind next time you're answering the phone.
There's a thing in software writing, software design, whereby in a piece of software, quite often you've got this variable and that variable, and you're incrementing this while you do some maths on that, and you're drawing some stuff on the screen and whatnot. If there are more than 5 variables that you are tracking in your piece of software, then your piece of software is too big, and you need to cut it in half and break it into smaller modules, because the person at the keyboard can't manage more than 5. Typically, beyond 5 is where things start getting complicated and wrong. So if you have more than 5 variables, your design is wrong.
I like that. See, it's always keep it as simple as possible. It's a good rule for life, I think. You don't want to overcomplicate things. So whenever you hear somebody really making something very complicated, either be suspicious that they are trying to pull the wool over your eyes about something.
I am very clever.
Be suspicious that they actually don't know what they're talking about. Because if they can't simplify it, then they don't know what they're talking about sufficiently to be able to explain it to you. That's just a little aside as well. So I would like to define thinking.
Thinking?
Yeah, because as a counterpoint to the multitasking myth, thinking means concentrating on one thing for long enough to develop an idea about it.
Right.
Which is kind of the opposite to what a lot of us do all the time when we're busy.
Right.
And so it's not learning other people's ideas, it's not memorising a load of stuff, even though that can be very useful. Mm-hmm. But what we want to do is think for ourselves, otherwise we are just really sleepwalking through life. Hence the title of this podcast. So you're just drifting through life, picking up other people's opinions and thoughts, and never really thinking about things for yourself.
Sure.
So I want to be good at critical thinking, basically, and I don't think I am good enough at it because it's difficult. Thinking is hard, but it's super, super important. So just before we go on to my 8 ways to improve your thinking, I wanted to just talk a little bit about why it's so important. And I've got a quote from a woman called Linda Elder, who is the president of the Foundation for Critical Thinking. And would you like to read the quote, Joe?
Many unexamined lives together result in an uncritical, unjust, dangerous world.
Yeah.
Many unexamined lives together result in an uncritical, unjust, dangerous world.
Which means people just drifting through life and going with the status quo and never really questioning anything. Because we are taught not to question things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even despite what you might be taught in school, society as a whole is constructed for us to not question things, not question authority, not question what you're told to do, not question the status quo.
Operate inside this box, please, and go to work and pay your taxes.
And if you draw that right to its furthest conclusion, you end up with stuff like the Holocaust. Because that's a whole bunch of people not really questioning what's going on or thinking what's going on and just going along with the crowd. There are all sorts of other reasons that happened as well. But I think that is a key one. And Lisa Elder's written some really interesting stuff about that kind of thing and why the world can become a dangerous place when we stop thinking about it.
Linda Elder,
yes. And Bertrand Russell, who I'm a big fan of, except for I have a problem with his book, but I'll come to that. Bertrand Russell also said, the great majority of men and women in ordinary times pass through life without ever contemplating or criticising as a whole either their own conditions or those of the world at large. And I would say that's really true, and possibly at no other time truer than right now. Which is, and it's just important. It's, and I would go even further than that and say that that kind of thing leads to people just accepting stuff.
Yeah,
it's like,
that's the way it is.
That's the way it is. And then blaming their crap on other people, which makes me so cross. And I think that is a big part of the reason why this country is in such a lot of the shit that it's in at the moment. And a load of people who are like, oh, I'm not very happy, my life's not very good. Who can I blame? I can blame those people who look a bit different from me or sound a bit different from me. And I think that's what it leads to, ultimately. And so, yay for critical thinking. You know, it leads to people not wanting to make things better. It leads to people wanting other people to make it better for them.
Yes.
And that's just not going to happen. If you rely on other people's agendas, they're not even thinking about you.
No.
So, okay, so critical thinking. Why does it matter? Really important because it lets you grow and develop as a person.
Sure.
And I think that's a really good thing. And it's fun. It helps you make hard decisions. And make better decisions as well. It's really difficult to make decisions if you are not very good at thinking, because you've got to weigh up the pros and cons. You've got to think about, it's like playing chess. You've got to think 4 moves down, and that's hard work. I'm crap at chess.
And yeah, in today's calorie-rich world, it's not necessary to be energy efficient anymore. Really, inside your own head. We're not living from one
berry to the next.
One berry to the next. We've got plenty.
One red berry, one red berry to the next. Another reason, and this is really important, another reason why it's really important to be good at critical thinking is that it makes it less likely that people will manipulate you.
For sure.
And I'm going to use the example of anti-vaxxers right now. And every single political party in the UK and abroad right now. And all of them, I don't care whether they're on the left or the right, all of them have found it really easy to manipulate everybody because the media has fed and fed and fed.
Yeah.
And so the ability to think critically just means that you are less likely to have the wool pulled over your eyes by everybody. So
whoever it is that has an agenda to pull the wool over your eyes. Yeah.
And if you're, if you don't want to think about it in terms of politics, think about it in terms of marketing. The shady people who are offering you the get rich quick schemes, think about why they're offering you those and whether it's actually likely that it's going to work.
They just want your $100.
They just want your $100. And it makes you as well a better choice for your customers and prospects if you could think through how to solve their problems for them.
For sure.
This is why you guys are so good at what you do, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get to how to actually improve your thinking. Because I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, I want to get better at thinking. How do you do it? And so I've been thinking about it.
I mean, before you even start having things to do, your 8 things, I think the prelude to these steps is at least being aware that you are a person who is quite often operating on autopilot.
That is actually one of my steps.
Is that one of your steps?
Yes, it is.
Why is it not the first step?
Well, it's kind of that step. It's think about what you're thinking. Okay, well that can be the first step then. So the first step then is think about what you're thinking, and this is something that I started doing regularly a couple of years ago, because of the cognitive behavioural therapy I had for my depression and anxiety, because I wanted to notice what I was thinking, because that's habits. It's system 1. You get into negative automatic thoughts and they destroy you from the inside out. So think about what you're thinking. So we think so fast, we barely notice it. You know, a thought arrives in your head so quickly and embeds itself there, and digs a hole, and it's just there then. So every time you have a thought, just pause for a second and think about it. Am I right? Is this thought correct? You know, and for me, it's my inner dickhead quite often. It's like, oh, you're really shit at this. And, well, am I actually? Let's have a look at the evidence. Let's examine the evidence. So yeah, think about it. What are your cognitive biases? You know, we all have cognitive biases, all of us. One of them might be the sunk cost fallacy that, oh, I need to keep doing this because I've put so much time and effort into it. No, you don't. It doesn't matter what you've done in the past. It's like how much time you're going to waste in the future, that kind of thing. Am I being prejudiced? What prejudices do you have? Because we've all got them. You know, if you're thinking something, oh, that person, I don't like that person. It's like, why? So every time a thought pops into my head that I think is unworthy of me, like,
where's that come from?
Like the other day I was like, oh, I don't like ASDA because I don't like the type of people that go to ASDA. And I'm like, that's an awful thing to say. And I'm admitting that it's an awful thing to say. So I sat there and had to think about it. I was like, no, that's really bad. And so, you know, every time that kind of thought pops into your head, you need to examine it. And that's an example of one of my prejudices that I don't like it. I don't like that side of my biases and my prejudices. And we've all got them. What's one of yours?
You must have been into a crappy ASDA at some point.
I was. It's like, yeah, it's the reason I don't like Primark. I got elbowed in the face at Primark once. Obviously, not all the people who go to Primark are going to elbow me in the face, but that's my point. You make that connection. Yeah.
And you stick with it because it's easy.
Yeah. And
so now you don't go to Primark?
No, I don't. And I have other reasons for not going to Primark. There's ethical shopping and all the rest of it. But that wasn't I can say, oh, that's my reason. But the reason is that I got elbowed in the face once at Primark, and therefore that's the connection that I made. And so that's what I'm talking about, kind of thinking critically. It's like, why don't I like Primark? I can tell myself it's for a lofty, you know, ethical shopping reason, but actually it's because of the assumptions I make about who shops there.
Yeah.
Which is not fair, and it's bullshit, and it makes me a dick. And I'm quite happy to admit that, but at least I know I'm a dick and I'm working on it. Because I had a bad experience in ASDA once. I don't shop in ASDA anymore. That kind of bias makes me a dick, but at least I know it and I'm working on it. So that's why. Do you know what I mean?
You need to go shopping in ASDA.
I think that you ought to share one of your cognitive biases that makes you a dick.
Oh, jeez. I don't know, really.
You've got lots. Don't even pretend you don't.
Do I?
You must do, because everybody does.
Well, yeah, I probably do. I don't know why any of them are, though. You can't spring that kind of question on me without prep.
Okay. So I'm working...
grey sweatpants. Grey baggy sweatpants.
What about them?
You're stupid.
I'm wearing yellow baggy sweatpants. Is that the same thing?
Not the same thing. Grey baggy sweatpants, particularly on men.
Oh. Right,
Don't know why.
But you know that's nonsense, though.
Yeah.
The logical part of your brain when you think about it.
Yeah.
But the knee-jerk reaction is, oh, don't like them.
Yeah.
So listeners, what are your cognitive biases that you know, when you think about it, you know makes you a bit of a dick? And
Spit them out, email us.
Yeah, email us, I'd like to know. And, you know, you can also email me some hate if you shop at ASDA, because frankly I deserve it.
Or wear grey baggy sweatpants and have a PhD in, you know.
Because and that's the point, it's like, it's ridiculous. And this is why I want, and it was that thought about ASDA that made me think, I need to get better at this, because I don't want to be the kind of person that makes those assumptions, because it's really dickish.
Yeah. And
so that's what we're talking about here. Think about what you're thinking. I am thinking about what I'm thinking, and sometimes I don't like my brain very much. Next way to improve your thinking, question your basic assumptions. So when you think, I know what I like, change that into, what do I like? Maybe I could try this. I know what I think becomes, might I be wrong? Let's find out. And I can't do this becomes, well, what if I try this way? So question your basic assumptions about the world, because I find quite often that my basic assumptions are either wrong, like flat out wrong, or a bit skewed. So that's quite a cool way to do things. Super simple. Way number 3 to improve your thinking, ask basic questions. We're getting back to the simplify everything thing. So rather than complicate it, because humans are really good at overcomplicating stuff, start with, what do I know? What do I know about this thing? How do I know it? Where did I get my information from? What am I trying to prove or find out? Where am I trying to get to? Am I missing anything? Like, really break it down, because I find that if you've got a problem that's difficult to solve, go right back to basics. What actually is it that I'm trying to do? What do I already know? And that can be quite a cool thing to do. Reverse stuff.
Okay.
number 4. Just as a thought experiment, really. So, what came first, chicken or egg? Reverse it. If you think that the chicken came first, then say, oh, what if an egg just popped into the world fully formed? Obviously, that's probably not true, but it gets you thinking about things in a different way.
I think as well, say you are... Quite often you're trying to justify a decision, I find. So it's like, well, I want a new telly, therefore, how do I justify it? And
because that's how our brains work.
Because that's how our brains work. You make an emotional decision and then you start justifying it with facts.
Yeah.
And you go, well, it's just got more features and I'll be able to do this without plugging in my thingamajig, and I'll be able to...
I don't like Primark because ethical shopping. It's like, no, because you've got elbowed in the face and you don't like it.
So quite often there's like a decision you've made before you start trying to dig out the facts as to why that actually is. So yeah, reverse the decision. I do not want to buy a telly because I am going to go shopping in Primark because
I'm not. I like my clothes to last for more than 2 washes. And that's a good reason for not shopping in Primark too. Cool. So and relating to reversing the cause and effect thing, is take an opposing point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of assuming that somebody who disagrees with you is wrong or stupid, as has happened a lot in the UK recently.
Yeah. By the way, in case anybody's not getting all these references because you're listening to this podcast in like 2025,
we've had the most...
I, for one, welcome our robot overlords, but we've just gone through the Brexit whole thing again. We've just had an election and the country's really divided. Yeah.
And that's all we shall say on
That's
that.
all we need to say on that.
But it's been a lot of ugliness has come out of it. I've seen friendships break up. I've seen people say the most horrible things to each other, and a little bit of fucking empathy wouldn't have gone amiss on all sides. And so this is again really cool. Put yourself in somebody else's point of view. Really try and understand where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
They might still be wrong after you've done that, but at least you will understand a little bit more about where they've come from. And maybe they're not 100% wrong. Maybe they've got a point.
There's some aspects of what they're saying that make sense.
Yeah. And you might still believe what you do, but you'll also have a better idea of why you believe what you do. If you look at your beliefs from the opposite side, and I think it's really important to do that rather than just be like, this is what I believe and that's the end of it. I think it's really important to look at it from a completely opposite point of view, and it's good for you. Join a debating team.
Yeah,
quite often you'll be made to take a point of view that you don't agree with.
Absolutely, and taking those opposing views and trying to justify them and understand them goes a long way towards combating, populism, where everything gets broken down into one simple concept. Where the Tories are nasty bastards or Labour are
socialists.
Total socialists, practically communists, and you're just like, oh, come on, really?
And we're all guilty of it. I have been totally guilty of it as well. It's just like, oh, I can't vote for them because they're arseholes, and I can't vote for them because they're arseholes. And it's like, well, no, things are not that simple actually. But that's and again, that's a symptom of the media having a lot of power over what we think, because they present things as very black and white because that's how they sell papers.
Yeah.
That's so have a look at things a bit deeper, and that leads me to number.
Whatever number's next.
Look at the evidence that you are being presented with. Where does it come from? If it comes from the Daily Mail, you can almost guarantee that it's going to be bullshit. No, I'm serious.
Is this one of your biases?
No, this is from my years of working in a press office and actually examining where their sources come from and discovering that most of the time they're not even researched.
Right.
And read beyond the headline as well. This is one of my real bugbears, is on, especially with social media, you'll get people like sharing a story and they've only read the headline, because when you get into the story, the deeper story, you're going to have an actual read of it. It actually bears little resemblance to what they've said in the headline. It's like, coffee is a cure for cancer. You go and read the story and it'll be like, in this one study, they found that it may have had a slight effect on this cancer in a very specific rat.
Yes.
And it's so... Don't just read the headline, go read the story, and also have a look at where the evidence has come from. There used to be evidence to suggest that smoking was good for you. Guess where that evidence came from? Guess where the research came from? It was funded by tobacco companies, yeah. The anti-vaxxers, great at providing evidence that comes from companies that have a vested interest in peddling really harmful shit.
Yeah.
If the anti-vaxxer evidence has come from the Whole Foods, the Green News or bloody David Avocado Wolf. Oh, that man. Anyway, Yeah, just look at where the evidence comes from. If it's been funded by a company with a vested interest in something, go find some other evidence. Have a look at what else is out there. Climate change deniers are really good at this. They pick the evidence from the 0.01% of scientific studies that say, oh, it's a bit ambiguous, and ignore the 99.99% of studies that say we're fucked.
Yeah.
So
go and watch that Flat Earth documentary on Netflix. It's hilarious.
Yeah, they're
desperately trying to prove that the Earth is flat, and every test that they design and do proves that the Earth is not flat. And every time there's a reason, they just start inventing reasons as to why that might be the case.
Yeah.
And don't change any of their beliefs.
There's a really good book called The Heretics by Will Storr. Read that, because that's a really good explanation of why people believe the things they do and how tied to identity it is. And this is another reason, by the way, why critical thinking is really good for you, because if you're trying to change somebody's mind, what you've got to understand is that if they believe something, it's really, really closely tied to who they are as a person, and that's why it's so difficult to change people's minds. And that's why I think it's really important to really think about your beliefs and what they are and all the rest of it. And so when I think about myself as a writer, I'm really careful that that's not all I am, that my identity isn't solely tied up in being a writer, because on the one day that I don't write, suddenly what does that do to my sense of self?
Oh yeah, you're like, I haven't written anything today.
Exactly. And it's like, yes, I want to get into good writing habits, but that's partly why I am also an aerialist. And you know what I mean? It's like, I think it's really important to think about your thoughts as almost separate from who you are, because it allows you to change your mind about things, which is super important. Which brings me to think for yourself, which sounds obvious. But I think quite often we think that is what we're doing. But I know that on many occasions recently, especially recently, I've realised that actually my opinions have been fed to me by social media, by listening to the news. It's why I've stopped listening. Every time the news has come on in the last couple of weeks, I've turned the damn stuff off, because I'm sick of having my brain screwed with. And it's why I've taken Facebook off my phone, because I don't want that feeding into me and giving me my opinions. So, yeah. And the final thing number 8 is write. This is a writing podcast after all. But I would say write, because writing is thinking. To write, we have to think more deeply. If you're writing something down, do you find that?
Yes, absolutely. We write a lot of documents to do with design and what the customer thinks they want and all that kind of stuff. And the customer will say, well, I want a thing that does this, and we'll go, okay, let's write that down and go into the detail of how that works and what it's going to do and 20 minutes into the conversation, we're discovering that what the customer thinks he wants is probably not what the customer wants, and you end up with a much more sophisticated, rounded thing.
Yeah.
That solves the problem that the customer had.
Yeah. So yeah, I would like you and me and you to just get better at thinking, really. And you might find that when you do start thinking about stuff like this and questioning things, you might find that people start falling out with you a little bit, because they won't like it. And it's a little bit. Was I talking to somebody the other day? I got an email from somebody the other day who wants to write a book, and he'd started and then kind of put it off because he'd mentioned it to somebody. And they'd said, oh, everything's already been written, why are you bothering?
Yeah.
And you might kind of think, oh, it's just a throwaway comment. It's not. It's like, it's the same as the person who, when you say you're trying to lose weight, they're like, oh, just have a cake.
Yeah.
Or when you say you've stopped drinking, oh, have one, it won't hurt. It's not supportive, it's insidious, it's nasty, it's awful. If you're the type of person who does that, stop it. It's holding a mirror up to somebody, them not liking what they see, and them trying to stop you from becoming the type of person that they don't feel that they can become. Yeah. So that's another reason to think for yourself. But you might also find that when you start questioning this stuff, people object to it for that reason, because they can see you thinking about it, and it's something that maybe they'd like to do, but it's too much trouble.
It's a bit difficult. It's easier not to.
Yeah. And if you can also get to the point where you're questioning people respectfully and having debates instead of just degenerating into internet arguing, that's fantastic, because then you can disagree with people and not fall out with them, which is a really nice place to be.
It's a good skill.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's really hard. Really hard. Especially when your identity is tied up in what you believe. So, right, what's the takeaway this week?
Well, Bertrand Russell, History of Western Philosophy. Read that.
Yes.
That'll give you some good pointers on how to think.
I mentioned right at the beginning that I had a bit of a problem with the book, and I do. It has no women in it, has no female philosophers in it. So there are other books that you can read as well that are really, really good. But I still think Bertrand Russell's book is a really good start, because it's easy to read compared to a lot of books on the subject.
Okay.
It's a massive thick thing. Don't let that put you off.
Yeah, do you read the whole thing start to back, or do you kind of pick around in it?
I've picked around in it. It's been a long time since I've read it, and I'm actually going to get it out again and have a read over the next few weeks.
Right, the noodle alarm says it's time to finish this podcast.
Yes, he's right. Next week, we're going to be talking about rotting badger growth versus grow your life. Joe's like,
Right.
what are you on about? So we'll be talking about that next week. I'm still planning my big book launch for January. There's going to be lots of cool swag, and I'm still planning my writing retreat in Fuerteventura in late February.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's going to be cool. I've just finished a massive deadline for a client, so I can breathe. Yes, Noodle, that's how I've been feeling. And if you've listened to every episode, email me with your postal address and I will send you a silly gift. And yeah, what else?
Oh, if you like this podcast, then go to iTunes, subscribe, write us a review, 5 stars, recommend us to your friends,
Yes.
send a link,
Yes.
all that stuff.
And if you've got any questions at all...
Hello.
Sorry.
Any questions at all, if you fire them to vicky@vickyfraser.com.
Yeah, any questions about writing a book, any questions about publishing a book, self-publishing a book, send them over to me and we will answer them on the podcast.
Sweet.
That'll be really cool. Thanks for listening. Noodle says goodbye and we'll be back same time next week.
Bye.